Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come into America.
Good morning, America. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here. We have Lynn Shaw, who worries about our kids and how to treat them better. Former Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Ty McCoy. Brigadier General John Teichert, who was with the Space Command, and he's going to tell us a few things. Dr. Peter Michalos, live long and proper. Roger Zackheim helps run the Reagan Institute, and he's going to compare Ronald Reagan to Donald J. Trump. Congressman Tim Burchett, what the heck is going on in Minneapolis? And let's start off with Prime Minister Stephen Harper of Canada. And with us today is Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister of Canada. And right now he is chairing the International Democracy Union, which is the middle right of the world, and maybe he'll correct me on that. Mr. Prime Minister, you're traveling the entire world, and I think you have a conference coming up in Washington. Give us a update of where we are.
Well, great to talk to you, John. Always. First, just fill in a couple of blanks there. The International Democracy Union is the global federation of center-right conservative parties around the world, includes your Republican Party. I chair that, and I was, by the way, PM of Canada for almost a decade. Now I travel the world, mostly on business, John. And what do I see going on in the world? Well, look, there's a lot of disruption. And a lot of it, not all of it by any means, is coming from the second Trump administration. That administration, as you know, has approached, I think, the world systematically very differently. As a Canadian, I have some mixed views about it, but there are some things we can explain. There are some things that we certainly can agree with, and others we have problems with. But I will say this: America, under the second Trump administration, whether you agree with the direction or not, the direction is certainly, I think, very clear and very decisive, and has had some pretty profound impacts already. I think the biggest single one really being in the Middle East, the curtailing of Iranian power, the backing of Israel in its war against Hamas, the further bringing together of the Sunni Arab world. Look, I think these are largely positive things, and I think what's most notable about them is that, after all the hand-wringing about, how powerful Iran was and how risky it would be to take them on, how easy it proved to be when you had a president that actually acted decisively.
President Trump has put his foot down, and there's no wars except Ukraine and Russia. And I hope, I spoke to President Trump last week. He called in to my radio show, and I don't understand. He says Putin is very tough, but they get along well together, and he thinks that he'll make a deal eventually. What is your opinion?
I don't know that President Trump has, quote, ended all the wars the way he says. He certainly diminished a lot of conflict in a lot of areas, especially in the Middle East, as I said. Look, Ukraine-Russia is a tougher nut. I think, to be frank with you, John, I really am not kind of on side with the administration's approach. I don't think Vladimir Putin will stop until somebody actually stops him. The Ukrainians are doing their best, but they cannot do it on their own. I think if Ukraine falls, I think it's not just devastating for Ukrainians and for Europe, but I think it's devastating for the world and devastating for the United States, because the bottom line is, no matter what President Trump thinks he has in terms of relationship with Vladimir Putin, I can tell you from knowing Vladimir Putin firsthand, spending many, many hours with him, he is an enemy of the United States. He uses every administration he can to play along with him, thinking they can make a partner of him, and he never will be a partner. He will be an enemy, and he will be a danger to the world until somebody stops him.
The United States has 350 million people. Russia has 40 million people. Nobody, when I say that, nobody realizes how small Russia really is.
Yeah, look, when we kicked Russia out of the G8, and I will be frank that I led the charge on that. We did it after the invasion of Crimea. Russia, as I point out in the G8, Russia had the smallest economy in the G8, smaller than Canada. Russia is really in many ways a military pygmy, but with nuclear weapons, and with a tough guy who is prepared to be tough if others are weak. I do think he can be stopped. I mean, look, the Ukrainians. Ukraine is a far smaller nation than Russia, and Ukraine has fought them to a standstill, and that's with, frankly, pretty sporadic support from its allies. So I agree with you. I don't think we should be trembling in our boots when it comes to Russia, and I wish successive administrations had, taken on Putin much more directly.
Well, if you were in the Oval Office and President Trump asked you for advice, what would you say to him?
I'd obviously emphasize that I think our two countries, John, are the closest in the world, and we really should fix whatever is bothering this relationship. In terms of Russia, Ukraine, I just emphasize Putin is not your friend. He's never going to be your friend. Don't think otherwise. And the day Putin has somebody who will stand up to him with the full might of the United States and NATO, he will back down. And that is the only way to end this.
Tell us about your organization bringing all the conservatives and the Republicans in the United States together.
Well, this is an organization, John. We actually had our annual meeting in Washington just a couple of weeks back. This is an organization, the sort of alliance of conservative parties, that goes back to the administration of Ronald Reagan. It was Reagan and Vice President Bush with Prime Minister Thatcher and German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, who set us up in the way back then, 43 years ago, I guess now. We've kind of been in and off the radar for a while, but, we've kind of reinvigorated in the last year, and we really exist to promote conservative values of freedom, democracy, enterprise around the world, and to really work with other political parties, like-minded political parties, to share best practices on campaigning, on governing, on advancing, those true, for lack of a better term, those true Reaganite conservative values. So that's really what we stand for. I'd say we've got some 80 parties, close to 80 parties around the world, obviously most of them in the developed world, but a smattering everywhere. The truth is, John, it's not a great time for our movement. Democracy, markets, free enterprise, freedom, a lot of these things are in retreat in a lot of places, and it has us concerned, but we do what we can to fight for the cause.
Iran, Israel, Gaza. Will there ever be a peace with Iran? There's rumors around that they have their own domestic problems right now.
Well, there'll never be peace with the current regime in Iran. The current regime is a theocratic regime. These are true believers. They are fanatics who, believe that the world should be converted to radical Islam, and that anyone who stands in their way is a satanic force. Israel is the little Satan, and America and its allies are the great Satan. And this is how these people think. At some point, I think they will fall. The regime is detested within the country. The current supreme leader has been there for over 30 years now, but is very sick. At some point, he'll pass. Perhaps there'll be change. But look, in the meantime, credit to the Trump administration for severely damaging their nuclear program for the foreseeable future, for basically eliminating a lot of Iran's proxy empire that was causing so many wars in the Middle East, including the Hamas war against Israel. Having Iran defanged really provides the opportunity for an era of peace and prosperity in the Middle East. I credit the Trump administration for the work it has done on the peace process. It's made tremendous progress. Obviously, Abraham Accords before that. But I listened to my friend Bibi Netanyahu the other day, and I think he made the key point, John, that what's standing in the way now is the disarming of Hamas. Hamas has to be disarmed. The problem we've got is no one in the world, not the Arabs, not your country or mine, really wants to go in and do that. Only the Israelis are prepared to do that, and for various reasons, the world has asked the Israelis to stop doing it. So, look, until that happens, it's hard to get further progress.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper, thank you so much for coming on. The world is a better place the harder me and you work.
Thanks for having me, John. All the best of 2026 to you, to the family, and to your listeners. God bless.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Roger Zackheim, and he's the director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. Well, Roger, I'm sure you have heard the comparison that Donald J. Trump and Ronald Reagan, and maybe we should cut 2 more spaces on Mount McKinley.
The country, when President Trump came into office in January, a year ago, faced serious challenges, continues to face challenges, and I think the last time we were similarly situated, you have to go back to 1980, as you just outlined. And one of the great things that we've seen, certainly from the perch of the Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C., is the way President Trump has brought Ronald Reagan into the Oval Office. And by that, as you know, I'm talking about the portrait of President Reagan, which hangs prominently in the Oval. But also, I think President Trump constantly talks about it. He's seeking to do a lot of the things that Ronald Reagan did. And he talks a lot about peace through strength, John. President Reagan ran on peace through strength, delivered it, rolled back the Soviet Union, and won the Cold War. And President Trump is the first president since Ronald Reagan to run on that platform. And I think he's done a lot in his first year to advance peace through strength. And another area which is a real parallel, which we could talk about, is tax cuts and restoring the strength of the American economy. President Reagan, of course, did that with his historic tax cuts and took on inflation and revitalized our national prosperity. And in President Trump's first year, he did the big, beautiful bill, made permanent those tax cuts. And I think there's another very important parallel on domestic policy between President Trump, his first year, and President Reagan.
Yeah, I'll give you similarities. President Trump, when he had the Chinese premier or the president at Mar-a-Lago, he was bombing one of their allies, and he walked over to them. By the way, we bombed, I forget who it was, and you could see the face on the Chinese president, Xi. And, Ronald Reagan would do that with faking out the Russians, and a lot of similarities. They were tough, and they knew how to play it.
I think the similarity stands out in the area that you're describing, John, is both President Reagan and it's clear from President Trump that they believe America should be leading in the world with strength and that our adversaries should fear us. And President Reagan certainly did that by calling out Mikhail Gorbachev and the Soviet Union as an evil empire and challenged him to tear down that wall, even when they were negotiating over arms control agreements. And President Trump, he went out to the Indo-Pacific, he was in Japan, and he made it quite clear that America is a Pacific power, and that President Xi should not do anything to the free people of Taiwan. And he certainly made his American strength clear to the Ayatollahs in Tehran in his first year. Of course, a great accomplishment was Operation Midnight Hammer, when the U.S. military took out Iran's nuclear weapons program following Israel's strikes on the Iranian nuclear program. So, yeah, there are certainly similarities there in terms of America leading the world with strength.
You know what I'm worried about, Roger? That I think if President Reagan didn't get elected after Jimmy Carter, I remember we had 17% interest rates, if people remember that far back. And our country was at the edge. And what happened now with President Trump? got elected. If we would have gotten Harris winning, I don't think our country would have made the 300th year anniversary of our country.
There were so many challenges swirling, and I think both in terms of foreign and domestic challenges, we're better off with President Trump in office. And as you're talking about with the challenge facing our economy on inflation, that has been an area that President Trump has focused on. He wants to lower those interest rates. He's talking about affordability, trying to break down the sticky pieces of inflation that still are saddling our economy. You know, there's a big debate over whether or not President Trump's tariffs are successful in working towards advantaging the American people and the economy and affordability. You know, President Reagan was certainly not somebody who led with applying tariffs. I'm all for them as it relates to the People's Republic of China, because we're in a competition with the PRC and President Xi, and it's not, they don't play fairly in the world of free trade. It's got to be free and fair trade. In that respect, I think President Trump is right to use it. I think with our friends and allies, perhaps he's employed that too much. But there's no question in my mind that economically and from a security standpoint, we are absolutely better off a year later than we were at the end of 2024.
You know what I worry most? They tried to assassinate President Reagan once. They tried to assassinate President Trump twice. And that's what I'm worried about the most.
Well, I have great confidence in our republic, John, and I worry about that. There are crazy people out there doing terrible things, contemplating terrible things. We've seen that throughout our history. But I have confidence in we the people. President Reagan had confidence in we the people, the wisdom of the American people. And I know President Trump does too. And please God, he will be safe and our country will be safe.
God bless America. Have a happy new year. And may we talk more often and try to accomplish something between the two of us.
Look forward to it, John. Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us today is Dr. Michalos. Live long and prosper is his motto. What can we do to live a little bit longer?
Well, today we're going to talk about a fascinating new area of medicine. And we talk a lot about anti-aging and anti-aging medicine. But the area of medicine is called regenerative medicine. And the word, of course, has regeneration in it. And a big part of regenerative medicine involves stem cells. And stem cells, we all have stem cells in our body. And what are they? They're the unique master cells, the master healing cells that can actually make copies of themselves and self-renew. And they can develop into many different specialized cells in the body, like muscle, nerves, blood cells. And they basically are our internal repair system. And they replace worn-out cells. And that's why people seek stem cells. And they are what's called unspecialized, because they haven't become anything specific. And when somebody gives you, for example, stem cells, you can't reject them because they don't have what's called antigens on them. You don't recognize them as a foreign body. They're like the universal donor cell. And they're very crucial for healing injuries, potentially treating diseases. For example, if someone has leukemia, they give you a whole bunch of chemotherapy to knock out your bone marrow that makes our red blood cells. And then they put the stem cells in the IV, and they know to travel to the body inside the bone marrow and start making new, healthy red blood cells and white blood cells, and that's how they're able to cure some cases of leukemia. There's another area that a lot of people hear about. It's called PRP, where they take your blood, they spin it down, and they take some of your stem cells and they inject it in a knee or an arm or a leg. But that's like getting, for example, 10,000 stem cells versus getting real stem cells that are collected from placenta or umbilical cords. That's like getting 10 million stem cells in one shot, and they tend to be more helpful. Not everybody responds the same, but it is a big deal. And we're seeing exciting things like at Columbia University with Dr. Stanley Chang and Dr. Rab at the New York Stem Cell Foundation. And they're going to be doing some stem cells on eyes and trying.
Well, she was on my show on Tuesday last week, and she talked about that they take skin and they take your own blood to create the new stem cells, and by doing that, there's no need for anti-rejection medicines.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's another center. There's a Dr. Moviglia at the Wake Forest University, and he also does it down in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where they take your fat cells. They basically do a mini liposuction, grow your own fat cells, and they take the stem cells out, and then you go and you get it injected. And I have friends and actually medical school classmates who've gone and had their various body parts injected, shoulders, and they've gotten better because they grow a bunch of your stem cells. So they collect, let's say, 10,000 stem cells. They put them in sterile culture medium, and they grow 10 million stem cells, and they're using that as well, which is an exciting field. But other areas that are also extremely excited, there's a company called BioViva where they basically edit your DNA to improve it, and they have done it. There's a lady who started it because her son had type 1 diabetes and saw that it was a genetic disease, and then it grew into a company that they're actually doing it now offshore. It'll probably end up in the United States. And BioViva attaches gene editing onto a virus that goes into your body, and it's made the telomeres longer, which theoretically can make you live longer. And they also were able to improve cognitive performance, and people's IQs actually went up by 10 to 20 points, and that's already been done. 200 people have already done it, and it exists, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about it. And a fellow named Peter Demandis, who has the X Prize for longevity, has featured this person who runs this company, and that's going to be another thing we're going to be hearing a lot about, where we can edit out the bad genes, just like at the Columbia University gala that you were part of. They talked about editing for sickle cell and splicing out the bad gene and curing people with sickle cell, which is a disease that a lot of people suffer, and of course African Americans suffer from it disproportionately. And this is a major area that people are going to start getting help through gene editing. And then finally, in regenerative medicine, we talked about the OSK Yamanaka factors, the Nobel Prize in Medicine by a Japanese doctor who found that we each have a copy of our younger version software, and that they've injected it into mice and that were blind, made them see. They've done it in apes, made them see, and now their human trials are starting. And that's why guys like Jeff Bezos have invested $500 million into a company called Altos Labs out in California, and the great work of David Sinclair at Harvard. And they're now going to do human trials, and it'll be amazing if they can restore vision in blind glaucoma people, and that will help people with diabetic retinopathy and macular degeneration. So a lot of exciting things happening in regenerative medicine. So that's why it's important to try to stay as healthy as possible and optimizing our labs, because our lab work is very important. It's like the dashboard on our car or the screen on a jet that tells you what all the fluid levels are. The same thing. We need to know all our levels, and when we optimize those levels, you really can extend your health span, which is what it's all about for the new year. And that's why a good physical starts the new year. Everyone should do that. Get their EKG, the women their breast exams, their pap smear tests, the men their PSA tests, their colonoscopies, blood work, and start the new year and know where you are, where you stand. So, you hear about all these people with sudden deaths, but you find out they weren't having regular doctor visits and they weren't taking care of themselves. Something simple as going for dental cleanings, 2-3 times a year, they've shown that will improve your chance of not having a heart attack and a stroke, because they found the same bacteria in the mouth, in the heart plaques, inside heart and heart valves. So, and now even for finding out if you have coronary blockages, they have something called a CAT scan angiogram. They inject the dye. They could tell you what your ejection fraction is, which is the pumping ability of your heart, and they can actually see blockages without even having to stick a catheter up your arm and inject it. So medicine, as you always say, has improved light speed, and now we're seeing in the current administration
it's warp speed.
Great progress.
Warp speed exceeds light speed.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing and a very exciting time. And thank God in America we have a capitalist system that allows the people to invest money and research and development money, and the rest of the world gets to follow what we do. And that's why so many of the amazing, great inventions have happened right here in the United States.
Dr. Peter Michalos, I will give you your 100th birthday party. That means I'll be 110 by then. Thank you so much.
John. Thank you for always getting the truth out on the Cats Roundtable.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is former Brigadier General John Teichert, and he was the Assistant Deputy Undersecretary of the Air Force, and he was with Space Command for a while. Well, General, what would you like to talk about in the new year?
John, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to your listeners. And I love the fact, as we've been paying attention to world events during the last week and a half, that national security and international affairs does not slow down. And maybe the thing that strikes me the most is that you got a worldwide scoop on the United States striking Venezuela that even several days later, the New York Times and CNN and all of those others are trying to catch up to. But the president gave it to you on the impromptu radio program from last Friday. And I think it's just amazing that that worldwide scoop came through John Katz.
Well, he called me to wish me a Merry Christmas. It was the day after Christmas. And I said, Mr. President, I'm live in the studio. Would you like to talk to 1 million people? He said, oh, no, okay, I'll do that. And that's how it happened.
Well, I think it's just amazing that, you know, if you think about what has happened between that time, your call from the president was sandwiched between the strike against Venezuela on that Wednesday before, the day before the strike on ISIS in Nigeria, and then the days to follow, he had meetings with Zelensky and Netanyahu in Mar-a-Lago. And I just think it's amazing that that massively important worldwide event of the first U.S. strike against Venezuela was announced on that show in an impromptu way.
I've never seen a president work harder than President Donald J. Trump.
Now, I'm going to give him the edge on this one, John, no offense. But you're right. I mean, throughout the holidays, Christmas, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, he is working hard for the benefit of the American people in the United States of America.
I think he learned a lot from his first presidency and where he got to now. Right now, he has one of the best presidencies of any president we ever had.
Well, John, I just think it's amazing at how much activity has gotten accomplished in the last year as compared to the previous 4 years where President Biden didn't even want to talk to anybody, and I don't exactly know if he was all there. But just in this last week and a half, like we've talked about, there was big news on Ukraine and Russia. There was big news on Venezuela. There was big news after that meeting with Netanyahu. I just think it's amazing how he is working very hard to make sure that U.S. interests are accomplished all around the world, and he never stops. And here's the thing that just warms my heart as a former member of the military and as someone that is a dad of a military member right now, is that the recruiting numbers into the military are through the roof because the president is focusing on U.S. strength, pride in the warfighting ethos, lethality and readiness. Those are all things that people come into the military for. We didn't see it emphasized in the previous 4 years, and now we're seeing record recruitment and record retention because we have a president that is demonstrating American strength, and everyone wants to be part of an organization where you have pride in your ability to accomplish the mission, and that's the way military members feel now.
I mean, we were going into the wrong direction in our military. Instead of being so-called killers, where our military should be, we were creating dainty people.
You're right. And we were distracted from the mission. You know, I was in Iraq during the transition from Trump 1 to Biden, and those Iranian-aligned groups in Iraq were salivating at the idea of American weakness under Biden. They saw it for the last 4 years, and now we're seeing a focus on the mission, a focus on U.S. strength. And even that press conference earlier this week with Netanyahu, when the question was asked about Iran, that the president very quickly pivoted back to those B-2 bombers that took out those Iranian nuclear sites and our willingness to do it again if necessary. That's the type of demonstration of strength and credibility of strength that makes America and the world safer, not because we're dainty, not because we're weak, but because we're strong and the world knows it.
General John Teichert, thank you for your service. Thank you for all the great things you did for America. And we're proud of you. And someday you're going to tell me how you got your nickname, Dragon Teichert.
John, someday, but in the meanwhile, I'm just honored to be your friend. Thanks for having me on.
You are listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. With us today is Ty McCoy, and he was the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for 8 years, and now he's a venture capitalist. What do you think is going on with all the problems we have around the world?
Yeah, I think that we're really seeing the culmination of a reordering. People are readjusting their strategies, the major powers. A lot of times people think of the major powers as China, Russia, and the United States. But they forget a lot of other major players, such as Europe, although they're 3 or 4 times the size of Russia. The United States is 20 or 30 times the size of Russia in terms of economics. China is much more so. I think what we're seeing is that the president, either consciously or in some cases unconsciously, has adopted what has worked for him in the past with great success, with the kind of really an integrated strategy that is really not understood by most people, including some of our adversaries, where people connect his behavior to Trump derangement syndrome, when in fact that's not the case. What he's really undertaking here is a distraction and detachment syndrome that is very much detaching the neutral countries, such as countries in Africa, Latin America, the subcontinent, India, the Middle East, from the countries that are really part of the axis of evil, Iran and Russia, North Korea, and China. And the idea is to start to detach other countries away from having diplomatic, military, and economic connectivity and relations, decouple those countries, bring them more into a community of nations that are willing to work for freedom and prosperity, and then slowly isolate the main supporting actors of really the country that is of greatest danger to the United States, which is China. So I think the president, whether he's making peace in the Middle East, helping to shore up security in nations like Nigeria or Venezuela, is really beginning to connect the dots geopolitically worldwide so that he can constrain the behavior of really the major actor, which is China, which has been using Russia and others as their cat's paw, as their leading effort to undermine U.S. and Western security. So I think that the effects are very good. They're continuing, and that leaders are rallying to him around the world, saying that America is willing to use its influence and use its knowledge and its economics, whether we're going after bad guys with selling arms, conducting diplomatic activities, placing tariffs on countries. We're helping our friends for a change and punishing our enemies, which was just the opposite of what was happening in previous administration under President Biden. So I think everything is really going well for 2026 on the national security front as well as the economic front. and that we're going to see a resurgence of support for the United States and for, freedom and democracy around the world, whether it's in the European theater or over in the Asian theater. We're having people reevaluate things, and they see that it is not going to be a Chinese century, and it is going to be a very strong ability of the Americans to lead the rest of the world in an order that is able to contend with the rise of China, which is, of course, a fact that we have to deal with. But it's not a fact that we have to just lay down and let the Chinese walk over us. We have to get ourselves organized with the rest of the world to confront that, and that's what the rest of the world has been waiting for, and I think that's what they're seeing right now.
I saw the other day they had the most powerful militaries in the world, and the United States is number 1, Russia is number 2, and China is number 3. I didn't realize that Russia has that big of a military.
Well, they have this huge draft military. A lot of them are prisoners. A lot of them are forced minorities. Russia has like 180 languages. It's really what they call it, the Russian Federation is the real name, and it is a federation. It's a federation of a lot of states, small states. Most of the huge territory of Russia is empty space, frozen space, and a lot of people, sort of joke that it's Russia is a gas company masquerading as a country. That has been what has saved them, is having natural deposit hydrocarbons and other minerals, and having a large population of many small groups of people, about 20% are Muslims, that they've been able to dominate from Moscow and St. Petersburg. And they've been able to create that Russian empire on and off. It rises and falls over, many years since 1200 A.D., when they founded the town of Muscovy, which is now Moscow. The original belief of the Russian elite, including Putin, is that the origin of the Russian state took place in Kiev, took place in the Ukraine, and that's the reason they want the Ukrainian territory and the Ukrainian country back so much.
Now, the other interesting chart I saw this morning is that population, India is number 1 at 1.4 billion something, and China is number 2 now, and number 3 is the United States of America, 350 million people. And the Russians only have 144 million people.
Well, that's what is so very strange is the Nigerian country is about 230 million. Nigeria is the biggest country in Africa and the biggest economy, and they're much bigger than even the Russians. The Russians' main claim to fame is nuclear weapons, scientific capability, and hydrocarbons. And
is that the nuclear weapons they originally got from the Germans after World War II?
No, the Germans were working on nuclear weapons, but they took a path of technology development which failed, trying to use heavy water, which was coming out of Sweden, which we, bombed, and Norway during World War II. We took a different approach to creating the atom bomb under Oppenheimer, and so we were successful, fortunately, ahead of the Germans. But the Russian nuclear program comes from the theft of the secrets from Los Alamos by the Rosenberg, the famous trial of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. They penetrated the Los Alamos nuclear program and stole both the secrets of the atom bomb and the hydrogen bomb, and developed those shortly after we did, so that then we were not the only ones that had the nuclear capability. And of course, the Russians, realizing how important it was, they rapidly built up their nuclear forces to try and, with the Red Army after World War II, to dominate and control Eastern Europe, which of course they did for many, many years. The Soviet Union used to have 15 countries in it, and they had the Warsaw Pact, which was 7 countries, and they had many other communist countries around the world. So under Reagan, before Reagan got there, they were an expanding empire of domination and ideological stamina, and they were very energetic and so forth. But when confronted by the Reagan administration with the inherent weaknesses that were part of communism in terms of both their ideology and their economy and their economic solutions to problems. They were able to be exposed. Their people were exposed. The people in the country were exposed to the failed policies of the leadership, and eventually using public diplomacy, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and others, the Russians and a detente. They decided that the Americans were too difficult, and let's just keep what we have. And but as President Reagan was famously said, which was very much a surprise to his National Security Council staff, I'm not interested in containment. What I want rollback. I want to free people. I want to free hundreds of millions of people by being smart, tough, and that's what he did. And that was the great victory of the Americans during that period, and freed many people from slavery and domination. And
you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
You served under the Reagan administration for 8 years.
Yes, I did. It was a great honor and great to be able to see how it worked and help the president and the National Security Council staff formulate and come up with a program such as the stealth fighter and the stealth bombers, which were used in the Iranian raid. We developed many of the systems today that are on the ground, that are technologically advanced, so that if we have to go to war, we can win the war today. And if we have to win a war in the future, then, of course, that's where the advanced development and research and development has to be paid for. That's going on now.
Ty McCoy, I want to thank you for coming on. Let's have a great 2026.
Sounds good. I look forward to it. We're going to keep working and supporting the information flow that you so vitally provide to the American people, and we'll keep everybody apprised of what we're seeing and what we're hearing.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. Well, Congressman Bircher, thank you for joining us. What are you're looking forward into 2026? What are you looking at?
I am looking forward to, of course, the upcoming year, legislation that I'm working on and just moving forward, trying to fulfill more of President Trump's agenda. A bill I'm working on, for instance. And I'll tell people some of the problems that we have with our country right now within Congress. It's this committee system. It's just so big, sir. You know, you got Republican-controlled committees, and we'll have 50 staff members, and the Democrats will have 50 staff members, just because it's just become so big. And what I would like to see in the future was some kind of division of that into smaller groups, because you've got these committee staffers who've been there, and you put a new leader in, and they're so deep. It's kind of the troubles Trump is seeing. With some of these departments like the FBI and all these others, he can fire the first 2 or 3 levels, but it's those down deep ones, those moles, if you will, or rat around the barn, as we say in East Tennessee. And I'll have a committeeman come in and tell me, a kid on the committee, a young person, say, "Oh, we'd love to move your bill forward, but there's really some problems, and some people, it just won't pass in the way it is." And then you say, "Well, what can we do?" And they say, "Well, we can do a study of it, and we'll study it for this year. And then we'll put it, and then when we get the results, we'll bring it back next year." And, of course, my problem with that is those studies, I think they go into this warehouse like that final scene in the original Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, I've never seen one of those studies. That's why I quit voting for them. And so I have a bill, for instance, I've been working on this over a year, that the Chinese will grab our genetic data from these genetic data sites. You send a swab off and get your DNA, and you find out, your ancestors were the king of England or something. Nobody was ever a horse thief. They're always in royalty. But anyway, they come back, and so what do they do with all that DNA data they've collected? Well, they sell it. They sell it on the open market. And who do you think buys it? The Chinese. And currently the Chinese, and they have been, working on a disease that would they buy our genome, is what it's called, and that's genetic history. And they're working on a disease to stop American women of childbirthing years. So if you could figure out a way to do that, I mean, how our productivity would stop then. I mean, we'd be over. We'd be finished because there wouldn't be, and it'd be the outsiders that have come in that are constantly causing problems. I mean, they have a long-term plan, and I have been working on that over.
Let me tell you something. You might be onto something because the birth rate in Europe and the Western countries is down to like nothing, 1.1%.
You're correct.
And I don't know if they're putting something in our food because some trillionaire believes that we have 8 billion people, too many people on the planet, or they're seeding the clouds, or I don't know what it is.
I don't either, but the Chinese, if they can figure out a way to do it, they'll own us. And yet I can't get the bill out of the committee. I'm going to see the chairman. I've had multiple meetings with this chairman, and are scheduled, and they always get canceled. But I'm getting ready to take it up with the speaker because I'm just fed up. I see the lobbyist involvement, and again, this is the type of issue. Just like when I'm trying to defund the Taliban, we passed that bill with your all's help. You were a great proponent for defunding the Taliban, but it's stuck in the Senate right now. Why is it stuck in? Why is this not a national news story that we're sending $40 million a week to the Taliban? But this other bill on the genetic testing, we ought to be able to stop the selling of our genetic material to China because they are our enemy. Let's just be honest. I don't really think they want to kill us. I think they're like a drug dealer who's successful. He doesn't want to kill anybody. He just wants to get everybody hooked on his goods, and he can keep them alive forever. And then you can just keep milking them. And I believe that's what China's doing to us. And I think that by doing so, they need to control our population a little bit and put us under their thumb. And then when you import the gutter of the world and they're out here tearing it up, like in Minnesota where they're stealing from us, you just see it coming from both ends. So I would hope that maybe in the future we could get a little more control of that. And that's sort of what that's why he's done so many executive orders. Because he knows he needs to do that. Because if he waits on Congress, he's either party. It's just not in our nature to do too much.
You have the most common sense of any congressman or any legislator I know.
Well, don't tell that to the public because that'll stop my contributions.
but you're more right than wrong.
People they'll stop doing business with you. Excuse me. They'll go towards you. They'll say, man, Mr. Katzimatidis, he's lost his mind if he's saying that about Tim Burchett. But I appreciate it. I think common sense is something we are missing in Washington, D.C.
Well, Congressman Burchett, thank you so much, and God bless you, and God bless America.
Love you, brother. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Lynn Shaw, who runs the organization Lynn's Warriors. And Lynn, you have some important information today. Tell us what it is.
Happy New Year to all of our warriors out there, John. This is the moment parents do not think about until it's too late. Now, I want to explain this. Right now across America, the past couple of weeks, the holiday season, kids have been unwrapping phones and iPads and gaming systems, and they've received all kinds of gift cards for online games like Roblox and Fortnite. But I'm here to say we have to talk about some of the guardrails and safety issues. If you have bought any of these as gifts, let's start off the new year with what you need to know. You have a duty for protection. And I also want to throw in, there's a new report out for children about earbuds, putting in the ears, reports coming out about radiation directly into children's ears with the earbuds. And I know most of the media and PR say the radiation is a small amount, John, and harmless, but any amount of radiation going into children's ears is not good. So just something to think about if you bought the earbuds for any of the kids, kind of a no-brainer. Here's what's happening. Parents get kids what they want for gifts, right? Parents see this as generosity. Kids see independence if they have a new Apple, watch. They have got the Chromebook, the iPad. But big tech sees this as they've hooked a new user, a kid for life. These devices are not neutral gifts. They're portals into algorithm-driven systems that expose kids to contact, and influence most parents never agreed to or don't even know about. It's a very uncomfortable truth, John. The risks do not come later. They begin the minute you give a device to a child and they turn it on. So we want to give out some practical advice today, what to watch for, look for, lock down, what mistakes to avoid we've learned from other parents, and why. This is not about judging a parent or a parenting failure, but but it's a corporate accountability problem because it is unregulated, the Internet. The only business going on where all these big tech platforms are allowed to run amok and do whatever they want because there's no accountability. So protecting kids in the digital world, why is it so hard? And parents should not be left alone in America to figure this out. So, number one, devices are not toys. They are portals. We're talking about devices, everybody, phones, iPads, gaming systems. Big tech sees, influence and dependency, okay? The kids are getting hooked the minute, again, they turn on a device and they're exposed to strangers, right? Private messaging, live chats, content that's funneled to them parents don't know about, they've never approved. So these platforms, and we have plenty of studies, we don't have time to go into it, are engineered to bypass parental awareness. So you have to be that warrior and you have to be alert. Now, what are you going to do?
Lynn,
Parents,
I want to point out one more thing that I'm very careful of. When I use my iPhone, I put it on the speakerphone, and usually it's a foot away from me in my brain. And people that use the iPhone and put it directly on their head, it's not. If you read the fine print, and they made it very, 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 very fine print now, that it's not good for you.
I mean, it's
and
kind
also whenever I use the what do you call it for your ear, the wire,
earbud.
I use the wire.
Yes.
Because you use the Wi-Fi one or the Bluetooth one, guess what? All that is going into your brain too.
But again, you pointed out the fine print. This is what big tech does with any of these devices. They make the print so entirely small or at the bottom of 30 pages of directions that nobody gets to that point to read them.
Nobody reads those warning signs.
No, they absolutely don't, because I do focus all the time, and I'll say, do you read the directions? Did you? They'll be like, maybe the beginning, but then I didn't bother.
It's like getting something on the Internet and say, you can't go forward unless you type in, I agree.
I am telling you, we have studies. It is done on purpose. Now, here's some good news to sidetrack for a bit. Governor Hochul here in New York, she just instituted warning labels on all social media. So although this is a little bit of, okay, like tobacco, alcohol, we have warning labels. John, if it helps one family or one child or brings awareness, at least it's something, because I'm telling you, again, we have the studies, we've got the whistleblowers. These platforms are designed so they do confuse you, so they do overwhelm you, so you don't read the information. You're not looking for it, and you hand it to the child and say, just be careful. But I want to make sure everybody knows what to do. When parents buy these devices, or any family members, right, grandparents buy a lot of things for kids, and even when birthdays come up, the kids want these devices. Okay, you've got to set up the devices together. And another thing is, please delay access. What child needs any of this before 8th grade? Start thinking delay is the way. Turn off, big one, turn off private messaging, location sharing, and autoplay. Do not assume that any of these settings that they say are already set up, from the shop when you got the iPhone, are protecting your child, because they do not. Do not get discouraged about any of this, because the platforms, again, John, want you to abandon safety. They make it difficult, but there's plenty of free help out there. You can always turn to linswarriors.org. Great organizations, protectyoungeyes.com, endsexualexploitation.org, all free information how you set up these devices, which have 30 to 50 steps to get to some safety. The next thing I want to say is gaming and social platforms, these social media platforms, are grooming environments. Primarily, we know right now 1 in 4 kids, 8 to 18, 9 to 17, whatever you want to say, are approximately 1 in 4, 1 in 3, it's a little murky always with the stats, they are being approached sexually online by a stranger, dialogue, images. Of that, John, 45% buckle up. Kids will go out and attempt to meet that stranger in real time. This is shocking. So we have to understand this is all going on and raise the awareness. And we have to understand friend requests. It has to be somebody you know, because so many adults are online accessing our kids. And again, this is without entering any kind of physical space in real time. You'd go to jail if you're going after a kid.
Give me your website for all our listeners.
linswarriors.org. Make sure you go there. Make sure you talk to your kids open and honestly. Make sure if you buy a device that you take responsibility and do it as a family unit together and talk about these issues, because that is the only way we will protect kids.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. Every Sunday morning, we'll bring you the latest in what's happening in our community, our country, and the world. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a nice Sunday.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.